It is 2:40 in the afternoon right now, but I've made this shot look like this. This is what it originally looked like. I've just done a little bit of testing to figure out how to shoot day for night because I have a short film that I've been working on that I'm going to be shooting possibly some stuff day for night. So I just wanted to make sure I can do it. So here is my experimentation with that. So the first scenario that I'm going to test is having an interior shot with open windows where we can see outside. So I'm going to see if I can turn that mid-afternoon sun into moonlight. Now, right now, it's looking very sort of, the background's just really blown out. Now, I do have a 1/4 black miss on here as well. I'm shooting on the FX30 with the Nisi Athena T1.9. Speaking of which, I'm actually going to stop it down to like 2.8 or something. So stop down to 2.8. We still have a little bit of peeking out the back there, so I'm going to stop it down even more. And as you can see, I'm getting very dark, so I'm actually just going to bring in a little light here. And this is a big issue with, and turn this all the way up. This is an issue with shooting like interiors where you can see outside, or shooting even outside where you're backlit sort of thing. So you need to add extra light using another light or maybe a reflector. Sometimes reflectors can work. So I'm just giving myself a little bit of light so I'm not just really dark here. And we still need to add a little bit more ND, so I'm going to do that. Okay, so I've gotten rid of all of the peaking out there, and that has fully just made me way too dark there. So I'm just going to, yeah, I don't know if this is recoverable. I would need a much bigger light than this. I just didn't want to. What I can do though, I might just turn the overhead lights on. It's going to look bad, but it'll give us a little bit more light. Not a whole lot though. So let's say this is sort of my shot and I'm standing in front of the mirror. Let's see if we can turn that into nighttime. So that there are going to be shots similar to this in this short film where the character's inside, but we have the windows outside. So it's more or less deciding whether we can shoot it during the day or whether we have to wait until nighttime to shoot it. But the benefit of shooting day for night is the outside isn't just going to be super dark. There's going to be actual light that we can sort of pretend is moonlight, and you're going to have more detail, you can have less noise because you've brought it down in post rather than just shooting it at night when it's actually just dark. And now I'm going to also just test the other option where if I stop the ND back up, so I'm like somewhat lit. So there's actually some light on me, you can see me, and there is a little bit of peeking out there. So it is blown out, but it's like, can I maybe make this look like it's just a really bright moon rather than a really bright sun? So yeah, this is scenario number 1. Let's go to scenario number 2, which I think will be a lot easier because we don't actually have the outside in the shot at all. Okay, so I've just sort of flipped the room around. I put the camera over there where I was standing. Then I'm gonna stand over here and we're gonna see now, just again, keeping this here just to give myself a little bit of light so I'm not too dark. Maybe if I even backlight myself here. So the only light that is actually on right now is the tube light that I've just put out the door here. So I've bumped up the ISO to 2500 as opposed to the 800 that it was at, and taken the ND up all the way to 1 stop, and then also open the aperture up to T19. So this is during the day. We're going to see if I can grade this to look like night, because that's the thing with day for night. You can add ND to make it look like night, but then you're still just shooting in dark because you're just limiting the light going into the lens. But when it comes to shooting day for night, and like you actually shoot it for the day and then you make it look like night in post, and that's sort of what I'm going to be testing in this video. And then the other thing we could do here is actually if we black out the windows, which I'll do now. So now I know this is going to be really dark, but if I, oh, there we go. See, this actually looks not that bad. So this is, again, this is day for night, but we've blacked out the windows. Literally didn't even black anything out, literally just put the blind down. And it's dark enough that any sort of artificial light that we add will look like it is sort of on at nighttime. The one thing we can't do here then is pretend that there's moonlight coming in the windows because the windows are closed or the blinds are closed. So if we are going to try and do like a fake moonlight thing, we're going to have to not see the blinds and set up a light to act as the moon in that case. But now let's go actually outside and do the other real test here. Now I'm standing outside. This is obviously way too bright. So let's stop this ND down a little bit. Okay, so this is outside with no peaking in the sky whatsoever. So I'm obviously way too dark here. What I can do being out in the sun is I can actually use a reflector, kind of like how I use the light inside. I'm just gonna chuck a reflector out here in front of me to sort of light the front of my face. And that's not gonna do quite enough for this, but it is gonna help a little bit. Just gonna back the ND off a little bit because it's still, yeah, it's still way too dark. Okay, so this is a lot better. We can see me way better now. And this is the thing with, you know, backlighting is you also then need to be able to overpower the sun with whatever light you're using. So a reflector or a really powerful light to sort of have enough light on, you know, my face here while I'm getting hit from behind by the sun. And the problem with how I've just done this is there is actually a little bit of peaking up here. Like this is a bit blown out, so that's going to be hard to fix in post by bringing it down, sort of thing. So this will be a good test, is like, can I fix this to make it look like night versus stopping the ND down more so it's way darker, but there's no actual peaking in the sky, because we want to be able to see the sky if it's in the frame. If it's not, then it's a little bit easier. I think this will be a good test as to whether I can fix this. And actually, conveniently, the sun just went behind a cloud, so it's actually slightly darker and slightly more diffused now. So I don't know if that's going to make much of a difference, but it is slightly different than the sun being fully out. But yeah, let's take this into DaVinci Resolve and see if we can make it look like night. So I've pulled up those clips in DaVinci Resolve. I'm on the color page. What I'm going to really quickly do is just to all of them add, I have a power grade that is just color space transforms to DaVinci Wide Gamut and then to Rec 709. So, and honestly, like this looks not too bad, like the exposure straight up. So let's have a look at the other ones. That's a bit bright, so we could bring that exposure down a bit. I'm not a big fan of how green the Tilta VND in the Mirage matte box is. It's just very green, so I might need to actually, what I might do, they should all be roughly the same amount of green. So if I just like do that, and then that just should take some of that green out. Let's bring this exposure down a bit. It's a little bit better, but we're gonna try and make all of these look like nighttime. And I kind of think that the first one might be the one to go with first. Now this was the intro. What I'm first gonna do is just like adjust the exposure, make it look good like normally. And then I'll probably darken it again afterwards. So like contrast ratios are probably decent there. And then I'm gonna go into the grade. First of all, I'm just going to try. I'm just gonna see what happens if I just like try and add some blue. Okay, so that's gonna look not great. Maybe then we can decrease the exposure a bit, and that's gonna look like somewhat there, but it still doesn't look quite right. So I think what I'll do here is, I don't think it's a white balance thing. I think it's more of an offset thing. So we're gonna go a bit blue, a bit there. We're gonna go a lot darker. I wanna keep those, oh, actually, what I can do, hold on. If I hold Alt and click, I can create an anchor point. So let's make an anchor point there, drag that up. I don't know, let's go with that. And then let's just try and make stuff overall a bit darker. We don't want to go too dark. And one of the problems too with day for night, especially when you're shooting outside, is that you can see I'm squinting because the sun was bright, whereas that wouldn't be the case in actual like nighttime moonlight sort of thing. So that is sort of a downside. Okay, now that we've got sort of that exposure, it's probably sort of about what we'll want. We want to be able to see the detail, but we also want it to be pretty dark. So yeah. So I think what we need to do also is, I'm gonna like maybe do some of this in different nodes, so it's not just all in the same node. So I think what we need to do now is, like, this sky is way too blue, so we need to sort of darken up that sky. So what I'll do is maybe go with a qualifier and sort of try and select that sort of sky area. Let's get this bit as well to make sure it's sort of included. And what we can sort of do as well, and this is actually something that I recently started doing just in general, is so normally I'll do the exposure with the curves here, but then if you go to the saturation versus saturation curve, what I sort of found out recently is if you reduce the most saturated things more than anything else, so you can sort of like create a bit of a softer look. So if I like drag that all the way down, nothing's going to be saturated, but I can sort of drag it across to have a little bit less saturation overall, but especially on those more saturated things. So if I go something more like that, and then maybe I push a bit more blue into everything. Seems like a pretty easy way to make the sky darker is to go, now this is before that we've added all the color, because we've made everything blue. So if we do a qualifier after that, it's going to basically select everything, so it's going to affect everything. So we're going to go before we add any of that color, back when it would have looked like this, select the blue there, and then what I'll do in it, it can even just go sort of here. On this one, I've selected this blue area, and then I've decreased the exposure here. And I use the curves just so it's like nice and sort of even. It's curved. It's not just like doing the offset here, because that's just going to make everything the same amount darker. But with the curves, it can sort of help a little bit. And then what I might even do is I will do the saturation versus saturation again and decrease that a bit. Let's see what that looks like in the end. That's not too bad. I think I adjusted the exposure a bit too much, so I can leave that. We'll go back to the curves here. And then we want to mostly bring down the highlights. So I'm going to go more up here. Bring those down. I can bring this down a little bit as well. Something like that's not too bad. So like that could, reasonably be a night sky. There are no stars, but it doesn't look terrible. So I think something like this could work, and it's like that, looks like it might have been shot at night. The light is pretty harsh. I've got harsh shadows on the wall here, and then also just harsh light on my face. And that is somewhat realistic because the moon light is generally fairly harsh as well. So the moon and the sun are a similar size in the sky. Therefore, they're going to be a pretty similar amount of diffused, which is not much at all. So let's say we go with this, and then I'm just going to sort of copy that across to the rest of them. Do this one. Okay, so we've made all of them darker now in that blue sort of thing. So like this one, I think needs to go a little bit darker still. And because there was that peaking, as you can see up in the top corner here, this is a problem. If you peak the highlights here, you can't bring them down the same as everything else because there's no detail there. It's just white. So that's sort of a downside there. And that's not really what we want to be seeing. So that's not great. Let's have a look at these other ones. This one is just a bit darker overall. Let's maybe bring up the exposure a slight bit. Now this one will have a bit of a smoother sort of roll off in those highlights because I didn't peak anything, but it just means that like my face and stuff is a bit darker. So what if I actually just go no exposure adjustment there? Not too bad. We're a little bit purple in the face, so that could just be can fix that. What if we go to the indoor one? So these are the indoor ones, and the thing with the indoor ones is like, yes, we want it to be blue if there's sort of moonlight coming in, or like we're saying there's moonlight coming in, but depending on what the lights you're actually using, that color will change. So my plan for the short film is there's gonna be moonlight coming in through all of these windows, but then we'll have like warm practical lights inside, only a few of them. So it's sort of that almost like teal and orange sort of look. We have the cool moonlight and then the warm lamps or whatever. So this one I actually don't mind as it is. And then what about this one? This one is a bit brighter. It's just very blue and it's still quite bright. So I might even bring this down a little bit more. Maybe keep that up. And then let's go to, what is it? Now, see this one, this was just for the sky. So that means it shouldn't do anything. And you can actually see it's affecting the cable there. So I'm going to leave that off With this one, now this is the actual like grade one where we've added all that blue. I think of maybe a little bit too much blue. Something like that's probably okay. But for the sake of consistency, I will just leave it as it is. Let's put it back to that and then I'll just disable that one. And then this first one, now this one with all the sky in it, this is not great. So we're gonna have to do something about this sky. I wonder if I can just sort of, no, let's go back to my qualifier here and see if I can include more. Well, I could just include everything. So let's get rid of the qualifier. And I will also get rid of the exposure. So honestly, this doesn't look terrible as it is, but the sky is still too bright here. So let's go to, oh yeah, this one we have the saturation still. What happens when we turn this off? Not a whole lot. So going back to my qualifier, we want to get sort of all this light blue as well. I mean, this light blue as well. And there is some of that like where there's the overlap with the leaves and stuff. The color's a bit different. So that makes it a little bit harder. But let's see what happens if we adjust the exposure here. Now that's not great looking. Let's just turn this post filter up to make it a lot softer. And like that's better, but it's not particularly realistic. So stuff like this, we will have to do a little bit differently. So what it seems like, what I've found here is it seems to be easier to do just straight up outdoor, you know, exterior day for night, because you can shoot it just in the sun and just pretend the sun is the moon, adjust the colors, adjust the exposure, and you're good. When it comes to indoor stuff, I feel like that's pretty easy anyway, because one, like in this case, I just closed the blind and it was fine. In this one, we're adjusting the colors. Maybe I'd also adjust the exposure a bit more, like it is still quite bright. Let's bring that down a little bit. But again, there's no like light source here, so there's not really much to do with this one. This probably wasn't a great example to do with this shot anyway. But then when it comes to this one, if we are seeing the sky and we want to have detail in the sky, then it's going to take a little bit more work to grade it to sort of make the sky look like it's a night sky rather than a day sky. Whereas the other option, what we could do, and let me actually just go get a clip from earlier in this, no, this one. So if we go earlier when it's like blown out here, if I take this and then if I color that the same, now that looks absolutely horrible. So let's get rid of this entirely. And because all of this is blown out, that's not great. So there's really not much we can do about it, because this is just all just fully white. And if we bring that down, it's not gonna look good at all. Let's at least try to make it look good. I don't think it is going to though. So yeah, doing that, not really gonna work. But to be fair, if the sky is blown out or the light is blown out, you're not gonna wanna bring the exposure down anyway. You want it to be bright. So I think if we're gonna do shots where it's nighttime and you can see out the window, if you can see the sky, it'd be a lot easier just to shoot it at nighttime and just light it with, you know, lights to pretend to be the moon. Whereas, you know, stuff like this, a lot easier to make look like it's actually nighttime. A little bit of work with the sky, but otherwise not too bad. This stuff, yeah, again, with the sky, especially with those trees. But I think what we could still do is if we have shots where there is light coming in the windows, and we're maybe seeing the windows, but we're not seeing out the windows. We're not seeing the sky out there. So we don't necessarily need that detail. We could probably fake that to make it look like it's moonlight. It's just really bright moonlight. My main findings for this are exterior stuff, not too bad. If you can't see the sky at all, you're probably gonna find it a lot easier. If you could see the sky like completely, if there is no, because like this is like broken up by all these leaves and it's like blurred out and that sort of stuff. But maybe if you had a really clear sky, you could probably do it easier. There is also the sky replacement tool in Resolve that might work as well. But one thing that I will have to try to avoid is shots like this, because that'll take a lot more work in coloring. So the shots that maybe would look similar to this, where we're shooting from inside, shooting outside, we're gonna have to probably shoot those at night, or at least at dusk, like do like a dusk for night sort of thing. Also, I don't think I mentioned this, but shot that on the FX30 shooting in 10-bit. So all of this like color grading stuff was with 10-bit, but the short film itself that we're gonna shoot in like a month and a half, it's looking like we might be able to shoot it on a Pixis. So we'll have 12-bit B-raw for that. So there'll be a little bit more flexibility when it comes to color grading, but this was all 10-bit, if you're wondering. You could probably do a lot more with 12-bit and then even more with like 16-bit red raw or something like that. Yeah, anyway. So that is a very brief overview of Day for Night and the testing that I just did now. Let me know what you think. If you have any tips on Day for Night, leave them in the comments. Any questions, also leave them in the comments, but go watch another video. Stay tuned in a couple months for the short film. Do all the other things. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.